Hello, everyone. Welcome to our fourth CME Palooza session. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. This is our social listening success story, amplifying engagement and uncovering insights session. This is a special lunch session sponsored by Kaplan Medical Education. A big thank you to them for sponsoring our session. Moderator today will be Alana Brody, VP for Strategic Educational Design at Kaplan Medical Education. Before I turn things over to Alana to introduce the rest of the panel, a few opening slides from me. A big thank you to all of our gold sponsors, in addition to Kaplan Medical Education, Med Learning Group, and Medscape Education as well. And also our silver sponsors for CME Palooza today, Academic CME, Daiichi Sankyo, Creative Educational Concepts, DKB Med, Global Learning Collaborative, and Helio CME. HMP Education, MedLive, Prime Med, and Talem Health. And our bronze sponsors today, Answers in CME, Bonum Continuing Education, CMEology, Excalibur Medical Education, Global Education Group, Infograph Ed, Integritas Communications, Iridium Continuing Education, Paradigm Medical Communications, Partners for Advancing Clinical Education, Peerview Institute for Medical Education, QDCME, and the last two of our bronze sponsors, Vindico Medical Education and Right CME Pro. Two different ways you can ask questions during CME Palooza. You can use our CME Palooza text line, 267-6660-CME. You can also use the YouTube chat. You can click on the little watch on YouTube if you're watching from our website, and you can use the chat within YouTube. I'll be monitoring both of those, both the text line and the chat, for any questions that may come in. And we'll address them to the panel as needed. Interacting with Poll Everywhere, we'll be using Poll Everywhere for a couple of questions here, so get that ready to go. If you need to, make sure you download the Poll Everywhere app, and you can join the presentation that's entitled CME Palooza 005, or you can just plug in the URL into a web browser, pollev.com/CME Palooza 005. I know this is my first go around with Poll Everywhere, my first session today with it. It's been a little wonky for Scott, so fingers crossed that everything works. We are going to find out together. That'll be fun. And lastly, our speaker disclosure slide. Any opinions, discussions, and or conclusions expressed are those of our panelists and do not represent an endorsement by or position of their employer, its parent company, or affiliates. So with that, give me one moment and let me take these down. And then Alana, I will add yours in.
Great, thank you.
And there we go. And take it away.
Thank you, Derek. And thanks everybody for sharing your lunchtime with us. Hey, Derek, before you pop off camera,
yes,
do you want to hear a joke about pizza?
I do want to hear a joke about pizza.
Nah, never mind. It's too cheesy.
With that, I'm leaving.
Okay. See you. Thanks. Gave me a giggle, and wanted to thank everybody for sharing lunch. I hope you enjoy your pizza or salad or whatever you're enjoying while we present this to you. So as Derek said, our topic today is social listening success story, amplifying engagement and uncovering insights. And before we begin, I'd like to introduce my panelists. David Sediati. David is our Chief Technology Officer at Kaplan Medical Education. Balesta Wiggins is with AstraZeneca, and Brigitte Ozzie is with Daiichi Sankyo. So thanks, you guys, for presenting with us today. Hopefully this will be fun. I think it will. So for our agenda for today, we've broken up our presentation into three sections. First, we're going to talk about regionalization because that's sort of the focus of the activity. Then we'll dive into social listening and how we incorporated social listening into our program. And then we'll share some outcomes with you about how this program progressed. So here is the structure of the program, the educational format for the program that we're talking about today. The program components included 8 live regional activities, 2 on-demand video modules, so Breaking Med is our news platform, and this was a text-based article activity, and our AI-driven clinical decision support system, Ask Cognitive. These programs were regionally developed all around the country. So our first audience response question, and Derek, thanks for bringing that up on Poll Everywhere. The question for the audience is, what percentage of the education that you either produce if you're a provider or support if you're a supporter is regional? So while we're waiting for those comments to come up, let me ask the panel a couple of questions. How often do you guys receive requests for grant proposals that are regional education?
Yeah, so honestly, we don't really see too many grants that take like a truly regional approach. If I had to estimate based on these numbers, I'd probably say like less than 10%, like really a small portion.
Celeste, is that the
Yeah,
same? Yeah.
yeah, I would agree with that. It's probably more like a handful. Programs that we probably receive would be more grand round style, so maybe not necessarily regional or based on any type of heat map approach, but maybe more institution based, specific uh, community cancer centers.
So Lana, having the same issue Scott was. I can see the responses are coming in, but it's not showing up on screen. So I'll just tell you, we got about 32% who said 100% of the education, and then the next, actually, right now it's a tie between 100% and then 10% 49, and less than 100%. Those are all around equal amounts, about 30% for all of those.
Interesting. Okay, interesting. So 100%. So we have a couple of either providers or supporters who that's really their focus of their education. And then most people are doing fewer. So I mean that's interesting. That sort of supports what you're seeing, Brigitte and Valesta, that not a whole lot of regional education being done. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the benefits of that specifically. So why might it also be beneficial to look at education on a regional basis?
So I think there can be a lot. Oh, sorry, Alana, was this a question for us?
Sorry, yeah, no, sorry.
Yeah, let me jump right in. Yeah, so I do think that there could be a lot of value in regional education. I think the greatest takeaway is that it could allow for like a more tailored understanding of what's happening within specific communities. So it could give us an opportunity to uncover differences in like knowledge or skills, or even like specific local barriers that might not show up in like an outcomes report from like a more national program. So, getting to really see more of those nuances, like what's, working well in one area versus where there might be gaps in another area. Because like honestly, the patients, like the systems, the resources, they're all so different from one part of the country to another. So insights like that can help us as supporters kind of think about how to better direct like future education, like meeting the clinicians where they are, like physically and literally, and then also kind of like tailoring the education to that community specifically.
Yeah, that's true. Like all healthcare really is local, isn't it? You have people in their local communities, really, dealing with what's happening in their communities. And when we talk about outcomes reports for regional education, what might be missing on outcomes reports that you receive for activities that are provided on a regional basis?
Yeah, I think in terms of outcome reports, they often aggregate the data. Again, I mentioned earlier that we may receive, let's say, a grand round style educational activity looking at, learners at specific institutions or specific community cancer centers. But when the outcomes come back, they are often aggregated as opposed to specific to those particular institutions. So, we would, I think it would be beneficial to see not only the outcomes segmented by those particular regions, but even going a little bit further in terms of the learner type, their professional designation, and understanding the specific learnings across some of those segmentations of the learner data.
Yeah, more granular. You'd like to see more granular data. Yeah, it's true because that gives you more insights. So let me describe a little bit what we did in our program and how we looked at regionalization. Actually, David, I'm going to turn this over to you to just talk about that.
Sure. Thanks, Alana. So Alessa, you brought up a good point about segmentation. And, as we looked at the program that we did, we wanted to really understand, what makes sense in terms of meeting the learner where they are. I think, Brigitte, you said that. So what's the difference? What's the difference by state, and how can we actually figure that out and understand those gaps? So the first cut of what we looked at is we decided, okay, let's segment. When we looked at the states, let's segment by incident rates and mortality rates, and really start to understand what that looks like and see what those gaps are. And what you can see here on the right hand side is the incident rates by certain states, and you can see in red is where it's a really high incidence rate. And what's surprising as you look at the high incidence rates, which makes sense, why don't we target where there's high incidence rates? We can also look at the death rates or mortality rates, and you can see that on the left hand side. And what's surprising here is when you look at it, the highest incidence rates are not the highest mortality rates. So right away, just even by looking at population analysis of the segments in those regional areas, and this case is for breast cancer, we notice right away that there is already a discrepancy or a gap, and you can start to think, oh, that already leads to the next question is like, how can we uncover more? So first of all, we decided for this program to target the areas where there are high incidence rates and high mortality rates, and try to understand where the gap would lie between the two while we start, and then we can start asking deeper questions about, what's happening at that point of care inside those particular states, and what can be different within those point of care areas. So again, we targeted the top 4 mortality rates and the top 4 incidence rates, and brought that all together. And you're about to see, as we talk about outcomes, what we learned by looking at that. But already, just by looking at high level data, we can already determine, hey, there might be something here and something different by region.
Right. So then when we actually started talking to people and looking at data from each of the regional programs, so we had 8 regional programs, but just to clarify on that last slide, we were able to place programs in the top 4 areas, but we did a full 8 programs for the part of this activity. At any rate, this data is part of our evaluation. This came from the evaluation after the learners participated in the program. And we asked them, I always or often, there's these 2 performance characteristics. But what you can really see here is the variation. That's the reason for showing this slide, is that we saw in Mississippi 100% of the time on this particular performance characterization, but in New Hampshire, less so, right? And this is after the education took place. So something's happening in those regions to really inform this variation. And that's part of what we wanted to do and what we wanted to dig out. So social listening. Derek, we're going to try another audience response question.
Yes, we're going to try it again. I think I figured out what went wrong last time. So give me a second to share it.
So here's the question. You guys can get ready while you're okay. While Derek's pulling that up.
And nope.
That was the last one.
Oh no.
Uh-oh.
There we go.
Okay, good. Great. Thanks, Derek. Okay, so this is for everyone. Which tactics do you use to generate real-world insights from HCP learners? So we're seeing activity evaluations and learner comments. That's, you would expect that, right? That's in CME. We have a lot of that, and some EHR claims data. That's interesting. Some focus groups. And looks like one of our colleagues uses a little social listening. So, David, are you participating in this survey? Just kidding. That's great. That's great. So thanks everybody for participating in that question. And it's nice to see the variety of responses that people have shared. So what is social listening? We'll just describe that as we interpreted it for our program. Social listening, as we interpret it, is scanning relevant social media conversations in real time, analyzing the why behind these conversations, and interpreting the data to spot trends and glean qualitative insights. So, David, can you describe a little bit how we chose the platforms that we did choose and why?
Sure. Yeah. And actually, just before I answer that, Alana, I just want to tie what we're doing in social listening. It's not surprising that you saw at least one person say social listening, because it's obviously social media is prevalent in all parts of society now, specifically when people are talking about their health and healthcare. So it makes sense that we can be informed by social media. And I think the other piece I want to mention is, as you saw there, people were mentioning activity evaluations and whatnot, which is, some people would say, "Oh, that's a self-reported data set. That's great." Where can we get other self-reported data set that can be sort of, unencumbered or not inside an activity? Well, social media allows us to go get that other information. So I just want to sort of set up a little context of why social media and why we're seeing it becoming more prevalent. And so as we talk about social media, what makes sense? How can we garner social media content and context? Well, just as we put this chart together just to sort of give you an idea of the different kinds of context you can get from social media. So as I mentioned before, the first one is mainstream social media. You'll know them because everyone's on them. Those are the ones that are being used, by the general population, and it's predominantly patient, obviously, and those are the ones that of, whether it's Facebook or whether it's Instagram or whether it's any of these mainstream social media platforms where people are just posting. So that's one place to get some information. Of course, the key part to all this is you want to make sure that the information that you're garnering or looking for or capturing have publicly available geolocation data, right? So bring this back to regionality. We want to make sure that we can tie what people are talking about to the regions that they're talking about, so we can actually use that as part of the study that we're talking about here. So that's one area. The second areas are professional career-oriented sites. You'll see more HCPs on those sites. There's a number of them out there where people are, again, posting and it's more of a professional network. So they're talking professionally to one another, and those are where we get the HCP pieces. And finally, there are community forums, and you'll see those community forums pop up again on social media, where they will subscribe to that forum, and they will talk about particular issues that they're having or share information in the community. Predominantly, that's patient forums that we're seeing, but we're also seeing HCPs and clinicians share in these community forums. So all in all, we're using a spread of all these different types of social listening platforms, and we're looking for geolocation tied to either the post or the comments about those posts, or some sort of geographic indicator of where those posts are coming from or which hospital systems they're affecting. So that's how we're looking at it. And then we're actually taking all that information and presenting them, which I think you're going to show next, Alana.
Yeah, so you did this for each of the 8 regions where the education was. And how did you ascertain the keywords?
Oh, that's a great question. So the keywords were generated or looked at specifically by our scientific directors and our writing staff, and those that really understand the space. However, as you probably know, keywords are different based on who the audience is. So if you're looking for keywords by patients, they'd be different than keywords by clinicians. Obviously, there are also expert patients, but as you start to look at it, you start to use keywords to really filter and identify certain areas, and you can also see it also by region. So we may get into it, but you'll all see a regionality effect across all sort of paradigms of what we're talking about here: education rate or what kind of learning they're doing in those particular regions.
Okay, great. Thanks. It looks like Derek has a question for us.
Yes, I had a question that came in related to mitigation. Basically, can you share some of the processes for mitigation?
Mitigation meaning, that's just how the question was Great.
That's how the question was phrased. We can move on if it's not one.
Sure. I'll take a tiny stab at it, and of course, they can continue asking. So I'm assuming when you're talking about mitigation, you're talking about looking at the data set and understanding how to filter, what to filter, incomplete data sets, and how you would mitigate against all those pieces. So that's definitely, if that's the question, we definitely consider all those pieces as part of what we look at, and not to steal the thunder from what we'll talk about. I'm sure we'll talk about. But the key part of looking at social media is understanding trends. This is qualitative data, we're not. I'm sure you want to get quantitative data and you want to say, okay, I got 1,000 posts or 200 posts too. But what really you're looking for is indicators of trends in those particular regions, and if everyone is talking about the same thing or different things. So that's what we're looking for. A mitigation there might be slightly different.
David, I appreciate you answering that question. I just realized I thought it was a new question that came in, and it was for the last session, but you did a great job.
Thanks, Darren.
Thank you for that. With that, I'll remove myself from the screen.
Okay. Let's see. So these are a couple of examples of some of the kinds of comments that we received. And so just to elaborate a little bit on what David was talking about, we found thousands of comments when it's okay. We found thousands of comments when we were scanning the social media. And what we did was we categorized the comments into different buckets like testing or adverse event management. And then we shared all of this with the faculty. In addition to the categorization of comments, we shared specific comments. So in this region, this is an example of a comment we did share with faculty. How reproducible is a finding of HER2 low, and especially of HER2 ultra low? If we get this result from pathology, should we rerun the sample? Is this actually a reproducible result? And then in another region, another question, having 3+ on IHC testing for any stage 4 solid cancer is now an option, and then just forwarding to hit up your pathologist. So a question on testing or comments, the faculty or the clinicians, the community clinicians are talking amongst themselves about testing, about multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary care, but we also saw patient comments. So a comment from one patient in this region talking about understanding their test results and feeling anxiety because of conflicting test results. And then a comment by this patient about appropriate utilization of a therapeutic. So these questions kind of lend color commentary to the content that's in the program, and we actually shared all of these comments with the faculty and then asked our faculty to intersperse these comments in the appropriate places where that education was being taught. So when the testing area, faculty would pause and say, we see that people in your community are talking about these things. And that made the education, really, really relevant. So, So before we go into outcomes, let me ask our panelists, how can qualitative methods such as interviews and focus groups provide unique, actionable insights that quantitative data often miss regarding HCP practice gaps and barriers to patient care?
Yeah, I can start. Yeah, I think as we were talking about this, the qualitative insights really helps to contextualize quantitative data. So while you are able to get trends from the quantitative data, the qualitative really allows for just a little bit more of a free-form discussion and more insights that you may not get just with answering a prescribed question. So you're able to get maybe more information in terms of specific or a variety of preferences, practice preferences, patient preferences even. From a patient standpoint, maybe more information into what that shared decision-making process is, barriers, practice barriers, et cetera. So I think it just further contextualizes and provides just more robust, concrete information.
Yeah, and I would want to add to that, I guess, just like expand on what you're saying. But, even though we get like pre and post metrics can show us that HCPs, learn something, or maybe if they were still, confused about something, we do see insights with quantitative data. But what we don't get is kind of like the why behind those numbers. Like why are they still confused? Or, even if they're not confused, it could show like what's getting in the way of like applying the knowledge, So let's say, in a program, we'll see that knowledge improved around, like, let's say HER2 testing. So that's great. But like qualitative feedback could show us that maybe even with that knowledge, there still might be barriers to like actually implementing it. Maybe there's some limitations to accessing testing locally, or like institutional barriers. So it just gives us like a little bit more information, a little bit more context behind the numbers that we're seeing. And we see that in the programs that we run now, like even just giving like a free text space, giving learners the freedom to just kind of write in their own words, gives us a little bit more insight into, a little bit more than what we could capture through like multiple choice options.
Do you ever run, other types of programs, focus groups, or other types of, programs where you might get qualitative information? And how would you imagine social listening might be different from that, or might give you different feedback or insights? Anybody?
Yeah, so I know that there's different avenues throughout medical affairs that do qualitative data. Certainly there's like ad boards. Sometimes we put out like surveys, focus groups, interviews, stuff like that. And they do provide really valuable insights, just kind of like what we were talking about, what you get with qualitative data. But what I do think is interesting about social listening, it's kind of like another kind of insight. What I think is unique about it is that it's unprompted. So it's not, HCPs responding to like a survey or reacting to like a presentation that they were just given. It's like what they're saying organically in their own space when nobody's asking them. So I feel like it's kind of interesting because it takes away some of the inherent bias that can come from like a structured program that's asking for feedback, like in a focus group. So it's, yeah, I guess when you're seeing what clinicians are saying on their own online, it's kind of more of like an authentic snapshot of like what's really going on in their minds. So I think it adds an interesting layer of qualitative data.
Right, that's where the trends come from, especially because if you watch it over time, things can change, right? So it's interesting.
Can I add to that comment, Alana?
Of
From
course.
another point of view. So I'm just taking it from the MEC point of view. So I know you're asking qualitative from the supporter point of view, but from a MEC point of view, we use that qualitative data to personalize the content and learning for our live learners. So it also adds another paradigm for the learners to look at. It's like, oh, wait a second, this is actually personalized for my region, and this might have come from one of my patients or a patient I might be seeing today, tomorrow. So that's one other piece of engagement. And I think also to that, and to just piggyback on what Brigitte was saying, that the cool part is because it's unprompted, we're using that unprompted also to also prompt our learners to maybe even open up even more of a conversation, right? So we're using unprompted comments to say, oh, wait a second, that's interesting. I didn't know that there was a concern in my area about this or about what's happening in this space or in this region. And then that garners even more potentially of these write-ins I think that we just talked about in activities. So I think potentially you can also use this to seed questions from actual learners. So you're getting unprompted to get prompted and getting those reactions. So again, it could be a little bit of a flywheel of getting more qual data.
Right, and that's really is what we did in our program by sharing the comments and the categorization of comments with the faculty to intersperse into the content to make that more engaging for them, to say this is really what learners or clinicians in your communities, what they're talking about amongst themselves. Any other comments on trends, David, that you might want to share, or how we might look at that, triangulate the data to look at trends?
Yeah, I think that we're just starting. So, I mean, we'll talk a little bit about outcomes here, but, we've been working on qual data for quite some time here at Kaplan and Projects of Knowledge, and, doing it, it started with basic word clouds and looking at trends through word clouds. But, now that you have multiple contexts that qual data, it's interesting to see, specifically now your regional context, and how does that compare prompted versus unprompted versus versus what we're seeing in the quant data, right? So again, a number of different ways you can start looking at this and trying to make sense of what's happening, and of course, just in general, and it was said earlier, because it's sort of like real world data, like how about you compare that to other real world data that exists for those regions, and how does that compare, or sentiment analysis in those areas. So I think we're just getting the tip of the iceberg of what's possible, and everything that's going on with large language models also goes to all of this. So just sort of geeking out on the tech side of what's possible.
Another source. Another source.
Yet another source, and then yet another way that we can really leverage all these pieces to make more personalized education and really get better engagement across our learners to provide better insights.
Okay. All right, let's move on to some outcomes. Oops. There we go. There we go. Okay, so this is comparing the data from the live learners versus the enduring learners. So we took all the content and we recorded it and made online on-demand education for the program. The live programs were customized, as I mentioned earlier. So what we're seeing here is on this one particular question, in both the live and the enduring environments, learners improved. Definitely improved in terms of getting what we call, considered the right answer for this particular case question. But what we see, and what's really interesting here, is the larger increase in learners in the live meetings. So we are attributing that, at least in part, to the fact that they were very engaged in that education because it was so customized to them and really spoke specifically to what's happening in those regions. If we didn't have the live to compare with the enduring, we might not have been able to see this trend. And this is comparing, so the aggregated responses from, this is from the live meetings. We have the aggregated responses. We see on this particular question, how comfortable are you monitoring for and managing AEs of HER2 targeted agents? If we aggregate the responses, we see it looks like they're very comfortable or comfortable. But when we look at the regions independently, this little yellow line says they're not comfortable at all. And so we can really isolate the regions that are having some challenges and need a specific focus. Again, if we hadn't had the ability to tease out the regional data, we wouldn't be able to see these comments. For this particular question, this is another case question. We can see that most of the learners, this is on the post-test, most of the learners picked the desired choice, the correct choice that we had selected or developed for this particular program. But we see a lot of variation, and not that you would expect to see 100%, but we still see variation in different regions. It just gives you some insights, right, into that things are different in different portions of the country. Again, with this is combined pre-post test performance on all the questions across the country. We can see this one region, the pre-test scores were low, while everybody seemed to do pretty well on the post-test. Again, it just points to that there might be more need in this one region. And then when we look at competence by individual region, so the post-test score, everybody seemed to do well, but there are 2 regions that maybe were, really needed more attention. And where social listening really comes to play on this data is that we saw these comments earlier. How reproducible is a finding of HER2 low? So again, testing was an issue in this region. We emphasized that in the education. We had the faculty emphasize that in the education. Multidisciplinary care was an issue for this region, and we emphasized that. And you can really see that made an impact. So let me pause, and before we go into final thoughts, Derek, I think you have a question for us.
Yes, let me bring that one up. Actually, might have 2. It's from Kelsey. Given that you did this regional analysis, are you suggesting it might be better to do this prior to a national program to observe trends?
David, do you want to take that, or I certainly can?
I can start. So I think, first of all, it was great that you went through the outcomes, but I know there's probably a lot of data on there, and it's very hard to even just get through the insights. But if you want to go to the one, I think it's 2 slides back, if you don't mind.
Let's see, can I do that? Okay.
Yeah, it's the one. Yeah, the one that breaks up the regional on the left and the national on the right.
Let's see here.
Lana, you might have to share your slides again.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
That's all right.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I'm going to punt on the answer to this, but I think looking at the slide can actually help inform, because I think whether you decide to go regional, then national, or look at national to go deeper in, the slide, it's probably slide 16, no, probably slide 17, I think.
This one?
Sorry, yeah, no, keep going back. Yeah, one more back. No, sorry, Alana, maybe it's...
It was this one, wasn't it?
No, it's the next one after this one.
This one? Okay.
Yes, sorry, thank you. Okay, so sorry, it took a while to get here, but on the right-hand side, you have what's happening nationally. So if you looked at nationally and you asked the question, how comfortable are you monitoring for managing AEs of HER2 target agents? You say, oh, great. Looks like people are comfortable, very comfortable. Looks like that's a good trend. We're doing well on the education, and hey, let's there's not much more to do here. But then on the left-hand side, when you start breaking it out, is what we did, and we broke it out now by the regions, you start to see, hey, wait a second, there are gaps. So and because there's gaps in these areas, you might, hey, now that we understand what it is nationally, now we can start to look at which regions we want to target to improve the national average. And that's probably the approach you want to take. So again, number of different ways you can do it. And I think that now you can go back and now you can start to say how you want to do the instructional piece of it. But I think this data set here is really what you're after, so that you can now target what you need to actually do to get your incremental increases. And I think that's also, I believe this program, we internally called it hyperlocal, where really it's not just local, but it's hyperlocal. Let's look at the ones where the gaps are that we need to improve on to move our average up across it nationally.
Great. Derek, did you say you had another question for us?
Let's see. I have another one just about, I think this was earlier on in the session, asking about sometimes I see what's missing. One thing I sometimes see missing is what is the academic versus the community breakdown.
Right. We do share that. I don't think I have that in this slide deck, but this program was all based in the community, right? Yeah. But that's another way of cutting the data for sure.
And I would actually, this is really and informing me too. And I would ask Celeste and Brigitte, when we talk about community academic, what trends would you look to see if it was more academic versus more community when we start looking regionally? Is there something that you look? It doesn't even have to be regionally, but in general, what are the trends that you would see from some of the questions we've been asking? I'm curious. Not to put the question on the spot, but just just to have some discussion.
Yeah, so I definitely think that we would love to see the differences in academic and community responses, given that the community practitioners, at least in oncology, but I think this could be extrapolated to many other disease states, but they see a large bulk of patient populations, and they're often kind of juggling not just one specific area like an academic MD might. So their education, I think, is really important. And so it's helpful to see where there might be areas of deficiency, where there might be gaps, so that we can really tailor specific community education to fill their specific needs. I think that's the value I would get out of it.
Yeah, I would have to concur. Often within the community, they're general oncologists, so they're all over the board. What I think we're beginning to see, and maybe others are as well, there are academic oncologists, clinicians that are taking it upon themselves even, to take their show on the road, so to speak. So let's say after a Congress like ASCO, for example, there are academic clinicians that are actually taking the initiative to go out into the community and educate community oncologists on the latest emerging data, et cetera. So really trying to help those community oncologists that aren't able to attend a lot of these congresses, such as the academics are able to, because they're so busy. So trying to meet them where they are.
That's actually really interesting, because I'm thinking an academic would go out and say, hey, listen, we have all this new data, we want to share it, this new, but as they talk to the community oncologists, like, they might uncover certain gaps and barriers that hadn't been considered at the academic level. Maybe formulary, maybe different patient types that are occurring in those regions that hadn't been discovered before. And actually that dialogue can be helpful, because it's like what we're discovering now as we're looking at all the data, we're seeing gaps. But really the next question is, why are there gaps? Mm-hmm. And how does that affect the barriers that we're seeing to change performance or change behavior? And I think that dialogue is essential to really uncovering, because that's what you need to get out of the qual or the discussion or the back and forth that you're going to have between, whether it's us as a MEC and the learners, or one of these academic doctors and the learners.
Right. We saw some of that too. Sorry, Balesta, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, differences. Talk about barriers. Even when it comes to reimbursement, I mean, those are going to vary significantly. So being able to understand, by region or by state, there's consolidations, a lot going on from that, healthcare institution perspective. So reimbursement would be a major barrier that, the academics may be able to glean some of that from those community oncologists.
Like, we know that some of the comments that we saw were this issue of around testing was access to testing, and sort of this interpersonal interaction between the pathologist and the oncologist, that we've sort of created a new category in some ways here. How do you look for a certain type? It's HER2 low, HER2 ultra low. How do you identify it? What tests do I order? How do I read the tests? How do I work with my pathologist? Mm-hmm. We saw a lot of comments on that, in that regard, and shared that again with faculty so that they could kind of probe in those areas and really try to tease out those issues for the learners who are attending the programs. So when you share this kind of contextual information with your medical affairs teams, is that something that they can act on?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it enhances the insights that the medical affairs teams access as well. So, it can enhance what they're seeing, or, provide additional insights to some of the information that they're gathering. And sure, I mean, even from an industry perspective, being able to have these types of additional insights from whether it's regionalization or social listening could impact other areas in terms of maybe an example might be patient education. So, other areas where you are impacting, whether it's the patient or the rest of the multidisciplinary team.
Yeah, and I guess to add to that, in terms of specifically like the social listening and how like that can be incorporated into like an outcomes report, I kind of love how you guys did it on the previous slide, where you paired the quantitative data with like actual quotes that came from the social listening. So it kind of like tells a story behind the data. And that's, ultimately what's going to help medical teams kind of see where the issues are, what the educational insights are, and, eventually tie it back to patient care.
Right. So you're talking about, I think this slide, is it coming up? There it is. Sorry, I can't figure out how to get it back into presentation mode. Sorry.
No, that's all right. It's this slide. And then there was the one that showed the different states and their gains, and you kind of paired it with a quote that came from each of the areas that had lower numbers. I think it was the last slide.
Oh, this one.
Well, yeah, this one.
It's the same. So these are the clinician comments. This slide had, right, the clinician comments and then the patient comments. But yeah, here I'm bringing that back to the regions that we had some advance notice that there was going to be some concerns and some very specific issues that were of interest to the learners in those regions. I pulled two examples from the regions that we saw at baseline didn't perform as well, and
it makes sense. And I was going to say, Alana, I think to Brigitte's point to this slide, though, I think that's what we're going after, right? As we're all working together to understand the why, right? So I know the word insights gets thrown around a lot. Like, yeah, an insight could be, a change or a delta, but the real insight is why, or even thoughts of a thesis as to why, right? So now I think we can now start getting some theses on whys and then start to test those theses right out there. And I think, Brigitte, you also said it, like it's unbiased, it's sort of unprompted. So it's like, hey, maybe some of these pieces can also, and maybe on your end, on the supporter side, some of these unprompted things can also, you see more data than we see also. You have data coming in from, let's say it's from the MSL side or from other pieces who say, hey, wait a second, we didn't see that. That might contribute to this gap that we're seeing over here. If it may or may not, and say, well, let's get some more data to figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. Like we have like pre-post metrics, and those are valuable, but this like tells a more full story about like what they're actually thinking. And so, yeah, add some color and add some value.
Great. All right. So as we start to come to a close here, how might you share social listening comments with your medical teams? What might be some ways that you might consider doing that?
Honestly, I think I kind of love the way that you guys modeled it. And I think it'd be really, really insightful to have that kind of paired data to just kind of add some more context and just, really tie it back to the learner needs.
Right. I mean, some of the other things that we saw, I think, were, we were able to identify emerging clinical issues. We saw differences in practice gaps, in different regions, which really, again, highlighted the need to customize that education to make sure that the faculty were really emphasizing the issues that were of interest to the learners in those regions. And also informing, future education. We know now that, issues for, I keep coming back to testing, but that was one of the strongest issues that came out of this particular program, that we really need to be very specific, both about how to work, with the different medical teams, the different professionals on the teams, how to really help them understand, the best ways to do that.
Yeah, I think it was a really strong combination of having regional and social listening. I think it adds like a lot of very specific like insights to to communities, and could help us, yeah, like you said, tailor education to really meet their needs.
All right. Great. Any other final thoughts? Derek's giving me the 5-minute warning here.
Yeah, no, I think you both summed it up well in terms of using all these tools that we have to identify what are some of the ongoing needs and really getting to that root cause analysis. So I think this is a great way of achieving that.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that we're about done, Derek. You're on mute.
How many times have I done this? I still can't remember to take myself. Thank you all for a great session. Really interesting. I appreciate it. Let me bring up my slides here. Once again, money, I love money. We have our CME Palooza scavenger hunt going on at the moment. If you go to ACHL's website, look for the CME Palooza logo, click on it and see what happens. We've had a pretty good response so far. At least that's what Scott tells me. He could be lying, who knows? But he's usually pretty good about these kinds of things. A survey. I love surveys. Please click on our survey when you have a moment. It's on the live page. There's a link there. It will not take you very long. It's just a couple of questions long, but it is helpful for us to know who has been participating, and if you have any ideas for sessions for the spring or for next year. We always use those comments and try to use that as part of our planning process. And then lastly, to view the next session, you can just go onto the live page of the website and click on the link for the 1 p.m. Eastern session, which is taking a clinical trials approach to outcomes design, sponsored by Academic CME. So that'll be the next one coming up. So again, thanks to the crew here for your session. Thanks again to Kaplan for sponsoring as well. And we'll see everyone soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.